Welcome everyone to another episode of Outside the Panel. I'm your host as always, joining the machine Hughes, and joining me from stateside, hooray for Hollywood, is Mr. Owen Hammer.
They call me the Hammer, but then I'm told it doesn't really qualify as a nickname.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We're here to talk about your book, Vlogbach. Did I pronounce Von Bach correct?
That is correct. Von Bach. Some people go Von Bach to be particularly Prussian, but Von Bach is what people say. Von Bach is about an undead monster who sues a movie studio for defamation for making a horror movie about him. It's a parody of popular culture and celebrity culture. And if you like classic horror films, you will definitely love this book. And if you don't like horror films, you will still like it. So this guy, Von Bach, who's kind of like Frankenstein's monster or Dr. Frankenstein, he's a guy who was killed in the 19th century and brought back to life with his own machine. Cut to the present in Hollywood, and he comes back to life a second time to find out that he is a celebrity because his lover, who's based on Mary Shelley, wrote the whole story. And everybody just assumed it was fiction because it's a story about a guy coming back from the dead. And now Von Bach is a household name like Frankenstein or Dracula, and he is mortified in every sense of the word. And at Worldwide Pictures, based on Universal, they are making the 100th Von Bach film, which is not an exaggeration. There are over 100 films featuring Frankenstein's monster and over 100 films featuring Dracula. So he sues them. And a lot of humor comes from the fact that the tone is this creepy gothic horror, but it's about the boring and mundane aspects of filing a lawsuit. And also a lot of humor comes from the fact that even though Von Bach is undead, he's kind of the straight man. He's kind of just an ordinary guy. These high-strung show business people are the real weirdos in Von Bach.
As I say, hooray for Hollywood.
I had adapted the play into a screenplay, and then adapting the screenplay into a graphic novel ended up being about 100 times more complicated than I could ever have imagined, because there are things like you have to have some kind of act break at the end of every page. You got to have like a little button there. The last thing on the page has to be something to make you turn the page, and then once I broke it up into chapters, I had to break it up into 20-page increments, and then I had to kind of rearrange stuff so there's like a real suspenseful act break at every 20 pages, and then just putting things into panels. A lot of gags that work on stage and on film can't possibly work in a comic book.
But vice versa. You know, it's give and take.
Yes, actually, there's a lot of very funny gags that came about in the process of making the comic book that I would never even have conceived of, because it wouldn't work on stage or in a film. You're like I'm a published comic book writer. Hooray for me!
You're like the Aaron Sorkin of the comic book world.
What I like is I like Dan Clowes and Adrian Tomine and Jessica Abel, and I like the independent stuff, autobiographical stuff. Von Bach definitely comes out of the discipline of doing non-superhero stories in comic books, non-superhero stories that don't make for good prose or don't make for good films, because there's some little like fantastic element to it. As you can see, Mariano and Hernan are fantastic. It's got that like clean vibe of the independent artists, but her coloring is so exciting. It evokes like really exciting superhero stories.
It has very much a cartoony style of comic book. It's kind of not caricature, but it kind of lends itself well to that extension. Book 2, the guy that's in the pyrotechnics, his mates, Barry, the special effects guy.
That guy looks like controlling for like the white males. That is of that age. That is every visual effects artist I've ever seen in my entire life. And that is what it looks like in a visual effects bay.
Okay, cool.
He's just like sweaty and pale and has like undershirt, and I notice he has this male pattern baldness that I don't think I've seen on any real human being in my life. Mariano and Hernan are perfect for that. Like, I'll just give them like a broad stroke of what a character should look like, and like boom, there they are. In issue 3, there's a character, and I just kind of said, he's like a Peter Cushing type. And I look at the artwork, and it's Peter Cushing. Mariano just drew Peter Cushing, and I hopefully I won't get sued. I think because it's a parody of Peter Cushing, I can get away with it. This is supposed to be a parody of the Hammer horror films, no relation. I love Mariano and Hernandez. I love their characters. For one thing, they can draw faces. It's amazing how many professional comic book artists can't draw different faces and then draw the same face over and over again. Especially women. If you look for our viewers over Johnny's screen right shoulder, there's the main character, Mina. One of the worst things about Mina is that because she has red hair, it's kind of hard to tell that she's supposed to be Asian. But Mariana knows how to draw an Asian woman, so that kind of worked out for me. But in close-ups where you can't see their hair, their costume, you still know who the character is. And their expressions are fantastic.
I agree wholeheartedly. The amount of books I see where characters just have like wooden faces.
Yeah.
It really, fair enough, artists can draw, especially superhero artists, can draw the powerful pose and everything, and they can get that right. But it's like sometimes you want the nuanced bits, you want the emotion bits, you want
Yes.
And there's some really good artists out there who just haven't managed to put life into the eyes.
Yeah.
And I say this, and people go, "Really? It's a picture." I'm like, "Yeah, but I would show them this and say, look how alive Mina looks. Look how alive she is. Her face is engaged. She's smiling. You can see the teeth. Her eyes are different shapes because she's smiling. You know, that's observational art at its best."
Yes. The film segments that we shot for the play was like 10% shot on film. I forgot to mention that. The film segments that made it into the comic book, the theater company's given me permission to put them on the Hammer Comics website. So if you go to the Vlogbach page, you can actually see the some of the films from the book exist as actual films, and you can see them. That's HAMMER-COMICS.com. The guy who owns Hammer Comics without the dash, I'm coming for you. Because the Von Bach is like a household word and the characters know who he is, but the reader doesn't. If somebody says that's just like that scene from the 1920 film, then the page will turn into that scene and you'll actually see that film clip. In the play, when the characters are talking and they reference it, the lights go out and it just cuts to that film clip. We actually went out and shot it on digital video. And in fact, the director of photography for the film clips, Aaron Moorhead, has become a huge horror director now. And you should check out all of his films. They're fantastic. I'd like to say I gave him his start, but that would be a lie. That was serendipity. The key to being a writer that people want to work with is that when you write a description of something, you're giving a gift to whoever has to execute that. If you go into too much detail or too little detail, that doesn't help them. But if you give them something that is just concrete enough that they know what to do, but abstract enough that they have the freedom to do it, then they love you. And and then the flip side of that is then you have to surround yourself with people who you trust to execute your vision. And I think it's more luck than some sort of talent that I've always been surrounded by talented people. But in the films and in the comic book, that's worked out.
I think, by the sounds of it, you do yourself a massive disservice. I think the fact that you're putting all this effort in is why people gravitate to yourself and to writers like you who put that effort in. Is Frankenstein, I've got to ask, is Frankenstein, because obviously that's the most comparative iteration with Von Bach, is he your favourite monster of all time? Is he your favourite Universal monster? Or?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated, even as a little kid. I actually watched, I think, every Frankenstein movie ever made 10 years ago before I finished writing the play, and they're not that good. The first two, directed by James Whales, are still very good and very important historically, but the sequels, they just get so ridiculous so fast.
I'll give you a bit of history. When my mum and dad went through a divorce when I was about 11, every Friday night, my mum would let us, when once it split and my dad was somewhere else, my mum would let me and my brother stay up on a Friday night to watch the horror classics that were on.
Yeah.
So we watched things like Dracula and the first two Frankenstein movies. we didn't get that far. My brother started getting scared, bless him, because he was younger. But generally, so I have a bit of a soft spot for those old black and whites.
The local TV station would you get like all the Frankenstein movies, and then going up the dial, they would get the Hammer Frankenstein movies cheaper, and then going further up the dial, it would be these no-name horror knockoffs that I think really like screwed me up because they were accidentally surreal, like the Croft TV shows. Frankenstein's monster was just so scary to me.
How did you get so much humour into Von Bach? Because I started reading it, and from pretty much the second panel in, there was gags or setups for gags, and these gags, they're not just there for they are genuinely very, very funny. This hit me straight away. I spotted it, I saw it, I read it, I laughed, I smiled. How did you manage to get so much humour into this?
Oh, well, I mean, that's just what I've spent my entire lifetime training myself to do. Writing humor, you've got to kind of get the plot to kind of crook and move towards something funny. But I would say the key is that the situation is funny. It's not a stock story with some jokes attached to it. And that was always the plan from the beginning, because I wanted it to be funny, but I didn't want it to be. I use the analogy of a Christmas tree. If you take a tree and you put a bunch of ornaments on it, that's a Christmas tree. But that's not how a story works. I think of a story as more of an organism. Everything's got to be in the right place or it's dead. I think that I've just trained myself to look and see what's funny about a situation. I'll give you an example. If you remember the slap chop, there's this guy who was selling a piece of rayon, called it the Sham Wow.
Sham Wow. You'll be saying wow every time you use this towel.
And then later on, he had a slap chop.
Hi, it's Fitz with Slap Chop.
Where you would like put something that needs to be chopped and slap it, and it would chop it.
Watch this. One slap, salad.
He shows you how easy it is to chop up some peanuts, and he goes,
"You're gonna love my nuts.
You're gonna love my nuts.
You're gonna love my nuts."
And then he slaps up some peanuts. They're about the size they would be at the ice cream store if you ask for peanuts. And he's like,
You know what they charge at the ice cream stores? $1 for toppings at the ice cream stores.
It would charge you 50 cents for that at the ice cream store.
Add a couple cookies if you want. So you can make it for 10 cents. Stop throwing your money away.
If you think You're Gonna Love My Nuts is funny, you might not be a good comedy writer. But if you think that they would charge you 50 cents for that is funny, because some guy is going to bring down the ice cream barons. He's going to go to the ice cream store and get a sundae and have his own nut chopping instrument that is going to undercut the cost of labor at the ice cream store. And he's going to say, I've saved 50 cents. That situation to me is so absurd that like I would want to make that funny.
So, where can people get their hands on Von Bach?
Go to hammercomics.com. And if you own Hammer Comics without a dash, sorry I was so threatening earlier, please come talk to me. You can buy the individual issues there at the storefront. You can go to Amazon Comixology. It's all under the name Von Bach, under Hammer Comics. Once all 7 issues are done, I'm going to release it as a graphic novel, and there will be a print edition of the graphic novel.
Excellent. So there you go, guys. Von Bach, there you go. Horror book with a humour twist from Owen Hammer, creator writer of this fantastic book. Go check it out. Owen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for
spending
time.
Great to be here. Thank you, everybody.
This is Joining the Machine Hughes. Once again,
Owen the Hammer.
Adios.